Okay, there we are. What's up, guys? We'll see who wants to pop in. I've got a view. Well, anyway, let's get this show on the road. Let me give you the horn. All right, here we are. Another Heidegger read for everybody who still respects me. It's all good. I'm much happier in my element, doing my thing, not worrying about people's judgments and approvals. Not interested in that, really. It's something it's lovely. Oh, don't get me wrong. I like approval just as much as the next guy. But, at the same time, I'm just going to keep doing what I like to do, what makes me happy. I've upgraded the slideshow. Shouldn't have any duds in it anymore. But that's not important right now. What is important is we're going to move on. We're going to do at least 2 chapters of Heidegger here. Maybe a third, depending on how I feel. And I'm rocking some classic death metal. I went for Left Hand Path by Entombed. Anyway, here we are. Let's move that over. Let's take a look at that. Make sure. Yes. Good. All right. Ooh, one sec. Got a speck in my eye. All right. Fear as a mode of state of mind. I'm hoping to extract some really deep things about this because I've been thinking a lot about the concepts of fear for myself as of late. How there's very interesting things that come with your personal development and growth associated with fears. And some of them might be irrational fears. Some of them are just uncomfortable fears. Some of them are just things that they're very real. They're going to happen. And you try to think about it because you don't want to act like you're just above it and lie to yourself, right? But at the same time, it's not that you're cowering to the fear, but it's you figuring out when the situation arises. You know, you run the situation in your head, and how do you face this? Like, how do you choose to face it? What's the story that runs through your head that when the sum of your fears manifests, you do the right thing, or you just do what's best for you, or whatever, right? Under my blindsided circumstances, I wasn't prepared to do what I really would have felt I could have done when 2020 hit. And now I have all sorts of feelings and attitudes about things, and I went through a whole lot of personal changes about my ideas of who I wanted to associate with. And I'm very glad that the normie world is acting, at least when it comes to what's happening right in front of your face, rational, natural, personal, human, where there's things that do and don't make sense that are happening in our more polarized aspects, whether it be something socio-political or the fucking nuances of those of us that are in our particular rabbit holes. And I've come to a point where I'm going towards other rabbit holes. What's up, Blue Kachina? There are 3 points of view from which the phenomenon of fear may be considered. We shall analyze 1, that in the face of which we fear, 2, fearing, and 3, that about which we fear. And these possible ways of looking at fear are not accidental. They belong together. With them, the general structure of states of mind comes to the fore. We shall complete our analysis by alluding to the possible ways in which fear may be modified. Each of these pertains to different items in the structure of fear. That in the face of which we fear, the fearsome. So let's take a look here. Oops. Sorry. Okay, nothing to read. The fearsome is in every case something which we encounter within the world and which may have either readiness to hand, presence at hand, or Dasein with as its kind of being. Dasein with, that's a new term because I've not seen them compound Dasein with the word with, meaning that effectively the fear is something that is existing right with you in the world. It's a deeply personal, inherent to your world kind of fear, right? Readiness to hand or present at hand fears. Those are, we already have an understanding of the readiness to hand and the presence at hand. So it's the design with kind of fear that I'm most interested in, because the others I think are kind of self-explanatory when you just apply fear to how we've discussed it thus far. But I am sure that Heidegger has a lot more to say on it than my basic interpretations. We are not going to make an ontological report on those entities which can often and for the most part be fearsome. We are to define the fearsome phenomenally in its fearsomeness. What do we encounter in fearing that belongs to the fearsome as such? That in the face of which we fear can be characterized as threatening. Here, several points must be considered. 1. What we encounter has detrimentally as its kind of involvement. Has detrimentality as its kind of involvement. It shows itself within a context of involvements. And 2, the target of this detrimentality is a definite range of what can be affected by it. Thus, the detrimentality is itself made definite and comes from a definite region. Right? It's kind of like when they're trying to tell you, like, oh, this asteroid's going to be a near hit to Earth or a near miss or whatever they say, right? They're constantly talking about these existential asteroids, which are its involvement is detrimentality. The context of its involvement is that it is on trajectory to have a significant impact with the surface of the Earth. And it is close enough to be worried about it because we couldn't do anything about it in time. Thus, the detrimentality is itself made definite and comes from a definite region. The region itself is well known as such, and so is that which is coming from it. But that which is coming from it has something queer about it. That which, and 4, that which is detrimental as something that threatens us is not yet within striking distance in Berhersheber Nahe, but it is coming close in such a drawing close. The detrimentality radiates out, and therein lies its threatening character. 5. This drawing close is within what is close by. Indeed, something may be detrimental in the highest degree and may even be coming constantly closer. If it is still far off, its fearsomeness remains veiled. Once again, the existential panic of a meteor striking us, or even the existential panic of hearing that someone has deployed an airstrike, perhaps a nuclear airstrike. All these kinds of things are freaking us out, right? Oh, here comes a hurricane. All of these kinds of things. Threats, and us feeling like that threat is going to overcome us and bring us into a world of isolation, suffering, loss, perhaps death. Indeed, something may be detrimental in the highest degree and may even be coming constantly closer. But if it is still far off, its fearsomeness remains veiled. If, however, that which is detrimental draws close and is close by, then it is threatening. It can reach us, and yet it may not. As it draws close, this it can, and yet in the end it may not become aggravated. We say it is fearsome. 6. This implies that what is detrimental as coming close by carries with it the patent possibility that it may stay away and pass us by. But instead of lessening or extinguishing our fearing, this enhances it. In fearing as such, we have thus characterized as threatening is freed and allowed to matter to us. We do not first ascertain a future evil, malum futurum, and then fear it. But neither does fearing first take note of what is drawing close. So, to first ascertain a future evil, malum futurum, right? Malum being like malpractice, malice. And malum, I believe we're talking about the same Latin root for the, I believe it was called the malum maleficaris, which was effectively the witch hammer, right? Or, effectively the hammer of evil. Like, this was kind of like a simulacrum of evil and witch in that respect, right? And that was a German publication, a German in their understanding of Latin. And then fear it, but neither does fearing first take note of what is drawing close. It discovers it beforehand in its fearsomeness, and in fearing, fear can then look at the fearsome explicitly and make it clear to itself. Circumspection sees the fearsome because it has fear as its state of mind. Fearing as a slumbering possibility of being in the world in a state of mind, we call this possibility fearfulness, or Furchtsamkeit. Has already disclosed the world in that out of it, something like the fear, some may come close. The potentiality for coming close is itself freed by the essential existential spatiality of being in the world. That which fear fears about is that very entity which is afraid. Dasein. What's going on here? Okay, we're going to read this one. Das Worum die Het is das ich verstehend sende selbst das Design. While it is convenient to translate das Warum der Furcht as that which one fears about, this expression must be taken in a narrower sense than one would ordinarily expect in English. What Heidegger generally has in mind is rather the person on whose behalf or for whose sake one fears. Thus, Furchen comes closer to the ordinary meaning of fear, for then it does to that of fear about. We shall soon see, however, that Heidegger also uses the expression Fürchten für, for which fear for would seem to be the natural translation. Notice that what he then has in mind, namely our fearing for others, is only a special case of fearing for in the ordinary English sense, and likewise only a special case of what we shall call fearing about in this translation. We'll read that when we get to it. Only an entity for which in its being this very being is an issue can be afraid. Fearing discloses this entity as endangered and abandoned to itself. Fear always reveals Dasein in the being of its there, even if it docks so in varying degrees of explicitness. If we fear about our house and home, this cannot be cited as an instance contrary to the above definition of what we fear about. For a being in the world, Dasein is in every case concernful being alongside. Proximately and for the most part, Dasein is... let's get back on track. Being alongside. We gotta let's read that. Hold on a second. Sign by. Here our usual translation, being alongside, fails to bring out the connection. A German reader would recall at once that bei means at the home of, like the French chez. Okay, at the home of. Interesting. In every case, concernful being alongside. Let me read that sentence. If we fear about our house and home, this cannot be cited as an instance contrary to the above definition of what we fear about. For as being in the world, Dasein is in every case concernful being alongside. Okay. Means at the home of. I think it means when you're in an unfamiliar environment that is home to something else, right? It's like if I go into the dream world, Freddy Krueger is a threat to me, right? You know, the night terror monsters. Those become threats to you in the dream space. And so that makes the dream space, because we have a looser connection with it than we do in waking life, makes us feel like that we don't belong there, that is that spirit's home. And when we don't know what to do, we chase ourselves out of the situation. Proximally and for the most part, Dasein is, in terms of what it is concerned with, when this is endangered, being alongside is threatened, fear discloses Dasein's predominantly in a privative way. It bewilders us and makes us lose our heads. Fear closes off our endangered being in, and yet at the same time lets us see it, so that when the fear has subsided, Dasein must first find its way about again. whether privately or positively. Fearing about something as being afraid in the face of something always discloses equiprimordially entities within the world and being in, the former as threatening and the latter as threatened. Fear is a mode of state of mind. One can also fear about others, and we then speak of fearing for them. Fürchten für sie. For sei, excuse me. I think that's for sei. This fearing for the other does not take away his fear. Such a possibility has been ruled out already because the other for whom we fear need not fear at all on his part. It is precisely when the other is not afraid and charges recklessly at what is threatening him that we fear most for him. Fearing for is a way of having a co-state of mind with others, but not necessarily a being afraid with or even a fearing with one another. Fürchten für ist ein Weiß. Okay, that's all just German. The second one we got to read, the third one we don't. Okay. One can fear about without being afraid. Yet, when viewed more strictly, fearing about is being afraid for oneself. Okay. Ein sich fürchten. We have hitherto translated sich fürchten with various forms of be afraid, which is its usual signification in ordinary German. In this passage, however, the emphasis on the reflexive pronoun, sich, clearly calls for being afraid for oneself. Here, what one is apprehensive about is one's being with the other, who might be torn away from one. That which is fearsome is not aimed directly at which who fears with someone else. Fearing about knows that in a certain way it is unaffected, and yet it is so affected in so far as the Dasein with for which it fears is affected. Fearing about is therefore not a weaker form of being afraid. Here the issue is one of existential modes, not of degrees of feeling tones. Fearing about does not lose its specific genuineness, even if it is not really afraid. There can be variations in the constitutive items of the full phenomenon of fear. Accordingly, different possibilities of being emerge in fearing. Bringing close by, belongs to the structure of the threatening as encounterable. If something threatening breaks in suddenly upon concernful being in the world, something threatening in its not right way, but any moment, fear becomes alarm, erschrecken. So, in what is threatening, we must distinguish between the closest way in which it brings itself close and the manner in which the bringing close gets encountered, its suddenness, that in the face of which we are alarmed is proximately something well known and familiar. But if, on the other hand, that which threatens has the character of something altogether unfamiliar, then fear becomes dread, grauen. And where that which threatens is laden with dread and is at the same time encountered with the suddenness of the alarming, then fear becomes terror, entsetzen. There are further variations of fear, which we know as timidity, shyness, misgiving, becoming startled. All modifications of fear as possibilities of having a state of mind point to the fact that Dasein, as being in the world, is fearful, furchtsam. This fearfulness is not to be understood in an ontical sense as some factical, individualized disposition. Interesting. Hold on. Ein ontsischen sin einer faktischen vereinzelten verangelang. While the verb vereinzeln often means to isolate, Heidegger does not ordinarily use it in this sense. Indeed, he contrasts it with the verb isoleren. Interesting. Not 100% sure what that means. It's slightly above my pay grade, but let's keep going. So this fearlessness is not to be understood in an ontical sense as some factical, individualized disposition. Interesting. So he's saying that it's not. That feels like what he's saying is that it's not something derived from the individuation process. That's what I get out of that. I think he's trying to allude to Jungian individuation, but as an existential possibility of the essential state of mind of Dasein in general, though, of course, it is not the only one. All right. We are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to jump into 31. All right, guys. Let's see here. That ends so darn abruptly. Like, that. Whoa, hold on, let me unmute. I'm waiting for it to, like, kind of, like, have a teeter off, but, like, they straight up, like, cut the audio. Like, it doesn't even give it a chance to, like, ring out for, like, a half second. Anyway. Welcome back, everybody. Let's jump back into it. Here's 31. Being there as understanding. State of mind is one of the existential structures. It's amazing how little time he went over fear and Dasein. It's very interesting, but there was a lot to unpack there, right? Because it didn't get into the kind of like, well, you know, the Jungian psychological particulars. It was giving you just a kind of a clear analytical relationship in the face of, you know, feeling like you are threatened in your world, to feel in a state of threat. State of mind is one of the existential structures in which the being of the there maintains itself. Equiprimordial with it in constituting this being is understanding. A state of mind always has its understanding, even if it merely keeps it suppressed. Understanding always has its mood. If we interpret understanding as a fundamental existential, this indicates that this phenomenon is conceived as a basic mode of Dasein's being. So I think it's very important to take away where he talks about the fact that it could be merely suppressed. And there's a lot of, like, when people are trying to, quote, wake you up, it's because they're looking at the world you're in, that, you know, that you're unconsciously in. And they're, you know, and they assume that it's best for you to know that you are in a world that they see from the outside as not a good world for you. That you shouldn't be in that world. That world's going to hurt you, right? And sometimes that's coming from a universal kind of wisdom. The junkie on the street may not know, and certainly probably doesn't care, because it's not the primal reason why they are the junkie on the street. That being the junkie on the street is horrible as a life choice. You know, to be in that world, to die, right? To be in that state of destruction, of self-destruction. And then you are hurting their feelings, making them feel threatened and afraid, because you're reminding them of all of the horrible things that are not happening to them right this second, but are possibly going to happen to them. And the truth is that they're just like, you know, I think the reality is that for most people, they're like, leave me alone. I want this to happen to me. I want to be in pain. I want to be destroyed. Right? And maybe that's them facing a certain kind of fear. A bad coping mechanism, because they're also dealing with self-hatred, which I find that self-hatred comes from having trouble breaking with experiencing a state of approval by your parents. Because when you know that you don't want to cultivate a world that they accept because of the path that you want to go on, you're going to have issues with them because you get shocked and don't understand why you're going to get strung out, hung out to dry, that the approval is not going to happen. They're not going to love you anymore, right? And you're going to have nothing and nobody and nowhere. Which, of course, becomes a problem because, you don't know how to secure yourself out there in the world, right? That's a fear that I got. Very honest publicly with that. I'm not here to hide a goddamn thing about myself. I ain't fucking proud of it, but I ain't fucking ashamed of it either. Because I've made peace with a hell of a lot of fucking things. And I am going to accentuate everything I love about myself and downplay everything I hate about myself. Because if there's anything that I have a right to do, is to see something about myself and say I fucking hate it. Like fat. I see fat on me and I fucking hate it. It's just like I've had enough of you for 41 years of my life. I am done having a relationship with fat. I'm quite done with it. But I don't want to be done with my relationship with eating fat. I'm just not interested in storing fat. So I work it off. I burn the calories that I gotta burn because I like to satiate my hunger. It makes me happy. I work hard. I earn it. And I'll figure out the rest as I go. This is how I build myself, and I don't need your fucking approval. Fuck you. All right. Understanding always has its mood. If we interpret understanding as fundamental... Okay, I read that already. Basic Dasein's being. On the other hand, understanding in the sense of one's possible kind of cognizing, among others, as distinguished, for instance, from explaining, must, like explaining, be interpreted as an existential derivative of that primary understanding, which is one of the constituents of the being of the there in general. We have, after all, already come up against this primordial understanding in our previous investigations, though we did not allow it to be included explicitly in the theme under discussion. To say that in existing, Dasein is its there, is equivalent to saying that the world is there. Its being there is being in, and the latter is likewise there as that for the sake of which Dasein is. In the forsake of which existence, being in the world, is disclosed as such, and this disclosedness we have called understanding. In the understanding of the for the sake of which, the significance which is grounded therein is disclosed along with it. The disclosedness of understanding as the disclosedness of the forsake of which and of significance equiprimordially pertains to the entirety of being in the world. Significance is that on the basis of which the world is disclosed as such. To say that for the sake of which and significance are both disclosed in Dasein means that Dasein is that entity which, as being in the world, is an issue for itself. So, it's talking about, like, it's kind of a meaning of life kind of statement, right? like coming to the understanding, right? What is it called then? The being there as understanding. So being there is when you're fully revealed, present, and functioning within the Dasein. And the understanding is knowing the reason why you are in that world. Why was I a guest on a certain show? Why was I friends with certain people? Why was I going to the city to see certain concerts? Why do I go to certain places to work? So on and so forth. And all of these things are different experiences in the world that are different states of being. And I navigate the shifting of my Dasein. I don't just live in 2 or 3 different juxtapositions of life, and then those 3 different Daseins are my functionality as a whole in existence, right? I'm all over different places. And I've got chart alignments that express what's up with all of that. Okay. Anyway, let's get back on track. Where was I? Sake of which, being in the world as an issue for itself. Okay, good. We're at the bottom of the page. When we are talking ontically, hold on a second. Did I do that right? Yeah, I did. The way it skips always makes me think that I jumped a page. When we are talking ontically, we sometimes use the expression understanding something. Sorry, let me just understanding something. With the significance of being able to manage something, being a match for it, being competent to do something. In der Bedeutung von einer sich Wursten können, irgendwas sein etwas können, the expression Wursten, to manage, to be in charge, is here connected with Verstehen, to understand. Okay, Wursten, Verstehen. Interesting. I can see how people would do puns and stuff in German humor if they were ever allowed to have German humor. Anyway. Existential, where were we? Being something. Shoot, I should have, there's 2, where's 1? It's up here somewhere. I've narrowed it to up here. I am sorry, I've lost my place. I should have highlighted. There we are. In understanding as an existential, that which we have such competence over is not a what, but being as existing. The kind of being which Dasein has as potentiality for being lies existentially in understanding. Dasein is not something present at hand which possesses its competence for something by way of an extra. It is primarily being possible. Dasein is, in every case, what it can be, and in the way in which it is its possibility. The being possible, which is essential for Dasein, pertains to the ways of its solicitude for others and of its concern with the world as we have characterized them. And in all these and always, it pertains to Dasein's potentiality for being towards itself for the sake of itself. The being possible which Dasein is existentially in every case is to be sharply distinguished both from empty, logical possibility and from the contingency of something present at hand, so far as with the present at hand, this or that can come to pass. All right, don't have to read the rest of those. As a modal category of present at hand, possibility signifies what is not yet actual and what is not at any time necessary. It characterizes the merely possible. Ontologically, it is on a lower level than actuality and necessity. On the other hand, possibility as an existential is the most primordial and ultimate positive way in which Dasein is characterized ontologically. As with existentiality in general, we can, in the first instance, only prepare for the problem of possibility. The phenomenon basis for seeing it at all is provided by the understanding as a disclosive potentiality for being. Possibility as an existential does not signify a free-floating potentiality for being in the sense of the liberty of indifference. Libertas indifferentiae. In every case, Dasein, as essentially having a state of mind, has already got itself into definite possibilities. As the potentiality for being, which is, it has, let such possibilities pass by. It is constantly waiving the possibility of its being, or else it seizes upon them and makes mistakes. But this means that Dasein is being possible, which has been delivered over to itself, thrown possibility, through and through. Dasein is the possibility of being free, for its own most potentiality for being. Its being possible is transparent to itself in different possible ways and degrees. Understanding is the being of such potentiality for being, which is never something still outstanding as not yet present at hand, but which as something which is essentially never present at hand is with the being of Dasein in the sense of existence. Excuse me. Give me a second to... All right, we're going to highlight that right there. So I want to scroll down and see... All right, so I can ignore all of that. Dasein is such that in every case it has understood, or alternatively not understood, that it is to be thus or thus. As such, understanding it knows what it is capable of, that is what its potentially for being is capable of. This knowing does not first arise from an immanent self-perception, but belongs to the being of the there, which is essentially understanding. And only because Dasein is understanding is its there can it go astray and fail to recognize itself, and insofar as understanding is accompanied by state of mind and as such is existentially surrendered to thrownness. Dasein has, in every case, already gone astray and failed to recognize itself in its potentiality for being. It is therefore delivered over to the possibility of first finding itself again in its possibilities. Understanding is the existential being of Dasein's own potentiality for being, and it is so in such a way that this being discloses in itself what its being is capable of. We must grasp the future of this existential more precisely. As a disclosure, understanding always pertains to the whole basic state of being in the world. As a potentiality for being, and any being in is a potentiality for being in the world. Not only is the world, qua world, disclosed as possible significance, but when that which is within the world is itself freed, this entity is freed for its own possibilities. That which is ready to hand is discovered as such in its serviceability, its usability, its detrimentality. The totality of involvement is revealed as the categorical whole of the possible interconnection of the ready-to-hand. But even the unity of the manifold present at hand of nature can be discovered only if a possibility of it has been disclosed. It is accidental that the question about the being of nature aims at the conditions of its possibility. On that is such an inquiry based. When confronted with this inquiry, we cannot leave aside the question, why are entities which are not of character of Dasein understood in their being, if they are disclosed in accordance with the conditions of their possibility? Kant presupposes something of the sort, perhaps rightly, but this presupposition itself is something that cannot be left without demonstrating how it is justified. Why does the understanding, whatever may be the essential dimensions of which can be disclosed in it, always press forward into possibilities? Is it because the understanding has in itself existential structure, which we call projection? Wow, they have a whole lot to say about this one word. Okay, Entwurf. Entwurf. The basic meaning of this noun in the cognate verb entwerfen is that of throwing something off or away from one. But in ordinary German usage, and often in Heidegger, they take on the sense of designing or sketching some project which is to be carried through, and they may also be used in the more special sense of projection, in which geometer is said to project a curve upon a plane. The words projection and project, accordingly, lend themselves rather well to translating these words in many contexts, especially since their root meanings are very similar to those of Entwerf and Entwerfen. But while the root meaning of throwing off is still very much alive in Heidegger's German, it has almost entirely died out in the ordinary English usage of projection and project, which in turn have taken on some connotations not felt in the German. Thus, when in the English translation, Dasein is said to project entities or possibilities or even its own being upon something, the reader should bear in mind that the root meaning of throwing is more strongly felt in the German than in the translation. So we're talking about, well, like projection, yeah, like we're getting a little bit into psychological projection here, which we've talked about for a long time, which is where you put the state of what you are and you try to kind of spellcraft that onto someone else. Okay. With equal primordiality, the understanding projects Dasein's being both upon its for the sake of which and upon significance as the worldhood of its current world. The character of understanding as projection is constitutive for being in the world with regard to the disclosedness of its existentially constitutive state of being, by which the factical potentiality for being gets its leeway, Spielraum, and as thrown, Dasein is thrown into the kind of being which we call projecting. Projecting has nothing to do with comporting oneself towards a plan that has been thought out and in accordance with which Dasein arranges its being. On the contrary, any Dasein has, as Dasein already projected itself, and as long as it is projecting. As long as it is, Dasein always has understood itself and always will understand itself in terms of possibilities. Furthermore, the character of understanding as projection is such that the understanding understanding does not grasp thematically that upon which it projects, that is to say, possibilities. Grasping it in such a manner would take away from what is projected its very character as possibility, and would reduce it to the given content which we have in mind, whereas projection in throwing throws before itself the possibility as possibility and lets it be as such. Okay, got to read this one too. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Gotcha. Seit es hierab zu einem gegebenen gemeinten Bestand während der Entwürfen die Möglichkeit sich vorwirft und als solch sein lässt. The expression einem etwas vorwerfen means literally to throw something forward to someone, but often has the connotation of approaching him with something or throwing something in his teeth. Heidegger may have more than one of these significations in mind. As projecting understanding is the kind of being of Dasein in which it is possibilities as possibilities. 1 second, I just want to get a sense by going to the next page how much further we got to go. We got to go here, here. Okay. All right. Oh, whoops. I'm sorry. Oh my God, now I'm making a big mess. Oh, we already read that. Okay, so we are down here, right? No, next one. There we are. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm gonna highlight right here. No, up here. There we go. Okay. Right here, we're gonna take another break. 1 second. Wait. Oh, it's going to start up again. I know it. Oh, there it goes. Gotta have the screen ready at all times, don't I? All right, there we go. That'll, we'll see how I feel. Let's pull that back a bit. All right, that'll be fine. All right. It's one of those nights where nobody's really listening much anyway. Where are we at here? We're an hour and 10 in. Hope you guys are having a good time. Or whatever. I'm sure it is a good time, even what you call this. Oh, whatever. This is, I am what I am, doing my thing. And all I care about is do it better than me. Do better than me. You don't like what I'm doing? You can't believe that all this that I do sucks so bad and that this is not good enough for Heidegger. You do it. You do it. Because of the kind of being which is constituted by the existential of projection, Dasein is constantly more than it factually is, supposing that one might want to make an inventory of it as something at hand and list the contents of its being, and supposing that one were able to do so. But Dasein is never more than it factually is, for to its facticity its potentiality for being belongs essentially, yet as being possible. Moreover, Dasein is never anything less. That is to say, it is existentially that which, in its potentiality for being, it is not yet, only because the being of the there receives its constitution through understanding and through the character of understanding as projection, only because it is what it becomes, or alternatively does not become. Can it say itself become what you are, and say this with understanding? Projection always pertains to the full disclosedness of being in the world as potentially for being. Understanding has itself possibilities which are sketched out beforehand within the range of what is essentially disclosable. In it, understanding can devote itself primarily to the disclosedness of the world. That is, Dasein can, proximately and for the most part, understand itself in terms of its world, or else understanding throws itself primarily into the for the sake of which, that is, Dasein exists as itself. Understanding is either authentic, arising out of one's own self as such, or inauthentic. The in of inauthentic does not mean that Dasein cuts itself off from itself and understands only the world. The world belongs to being oneself as being in the world. On the other hand, authentic understanding, no less than that which is inauthentic, can be either genuine or not genuine. As potentiality for being, understanding is altogether permeated with possibility. When one is diverted into sich Verkligen in one of these basic possibilities of understanding the other is not laid aside. Legd nach nicht ab. Because understanding in every case pertains rather to Dasein's full disclosedness as being in the world. This diversion of the understanding is an existential modification of projection as a whole. Hold on a second. There we go. In understanding the world, being in is always understood along with it, while understanding of existence as such is always an understanding of the world. As factical, Dasein, any Dasein has already diverted its potentiality for being into a possibility of understanding. In its projective character, understanding goes to make up existentially what we call Dasein's sight, or Sicht, with the disclosedness of the there. This sight is existentially, existential seanda, and Dasein is this sight equiprimordially in each of those basic ways of its being, which we have already noted as the circumspection, Umsicht, of concern, as the considerateness, Rücksicht, of solicitude, and as that sight which is directed upon being as such, Sicht auf das Sein als Solches, for the sake of which any Dasein is as it is. The sight which is related primarily and on the whole to existence we call transparency. Durchsichtigkeit. We choose this term to designate knowledge of the self. Hang on a second. Selbsterkenntnis. This should be carefully distinguished from the sich kennen disclosed on this page. Perhaps this distinction can be expressed through rather crudely by pointing out that we are here concerned with full and sophisticated knowledge of the self in all its implications, while in the earlier passage we were concerned with the kind of self-knowledge which one loses when one forgets oneself or does something so out of character that one no longer knows oneself, right? I will notice this many times with certain people that I'm like, when I'm in my state of being kind of like deeply observational of someone else, especially if they are in my vicinity, and I see them, they're just there, and they may be out of place or something. So I'm looking, I'm just like, what's going on? Because I need to be over there in a minute. And how long is he going to be right there? Because I'm going to have to say something, right? And so you have to turn around and interfere with someone else in your world. And then this gets back to the way earlier chapters about people as subjects or objects in your world. So anyway, where was I? Dasein and sight equiprimordial, the basic of being, in which we are already known as circumspective. So, okay, hold on a sec. No longer knows oneself. All right, I had read number 1. And where was number 1? Wasn't that? Okay, yeah. That's right. Okay, so I'm all the way down there. Thank you. Transparency, we choose this term to designate knowledge of the self. Yeah. once again, these are deeper nuances of individuation in that respect. You know, we've gone from something that was to be not individuated to something that is to be individuated. So in a sense, which is well understood, so as to indicate that here it is not a matter of perceptually tracking down and inspecting a point called the self, but rather one of seizing upon the full disclosedness of being in the world throughout all the constitutive items which are essential to it, and doing so with understanding. In existence, entities cite themselves, sicht, only insofar as they have become transparent to themselves with equal primordiality in those items which are constituted for their existence, their being alongside the world and their being with others. So that's, that's all very interesting, because the forefront of my thinking about that is going to directly correspond to the events of my time on in the public eye on the internet last night. As a guest, and how I didn't like something I was involved with during that time, and after knowing that something was wrong and coming to the conclusion that I don't like the change in this world at present moment, I am no longer interested in my engagement with it, and I make an unceremonious exit. Because of how the self ended up reacting to everything. Right? Me, in my deep core of, regardless of anything rational about any of it, regardless of any of fucking that shit, something deep down inside says, that wasn't right. That wasn't right. Now, your sense of place in this world has felt a certain sense of betrayal, where you thought that certain people had a certain relationship with you, they were going to treat you a certain way. There was a certain expectation based on rapport that had been built over time, relationship built over time, trust that had been built over time. And then all of that, for you on your deepest level, was smashed. And without a chance for recourse. Or a recourse that was made a moot point. And was a misrepresentation of you and everything else. Right? So you're dealing with that personal issue in many respects. I want to see something real quick before I move. Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. So let's get back to the reading. I did remember to, yes, I had to make sure my mic was on. All right. So yeah, so the there being alongside. Like here I'm in my element. Last night I was in someone else's element. Which is inherent to their presence there, because they are what makes it the there, and constitutes the construct of that Dasein and the way that things are there, the design of the platform. So on the other hand, Dasein's opaqueness, Untersiegigkeit, is not rooted primarily and solely in egocentric self-deception. It is rooted just as much in lack of acquaintance with the world. Egocentric self-deception. It's very interesting. That's so much for me to dwell on because, like, I'm a very proud person. A very confident person. And I'd say that I feign arrogance for fun. And I don't necessarily have to tell you that, depending on what I am doing. But my words and my actions are two different things, and often I am saying something to make a point, and I'm just not going to waste my time all day saying, no, just kidding, I'm not precisely, like, you should be able to figure out what I'm all that at or not. I'm not, like, doing some sort of, you know, I don't have all these ridiculous kind of brags. Although I will have all sorts of ridiculous kind of brags, right? It's just like Crowley was like, you know, he just made up his own shit to brag about. You know, like he goes through, he figures out a ritual process, like something that's a long, hard, enduring thing to do. It's his own concoction based somewhat loosely on some ancient traditions. He makes that part of his whole discipline, and then that becomes like a title that he can achieve just because he did the ritual, right? As long as the ritual had a cost and it wasn't something easy, you know? Climbing mountains, as an example, like myself. And even though it's really just Breakneck Ridge, there are still aspects of Breakneck Ridge that are above my pay grade, and thus I am still using it to master my greater abilities to scale. If I even care to do that. You know, it's just certain things I care to do, certain things I don't. We must be sure, we must, to be sure, guard against the misunderstanding of the expression sight. It corresponds to the clearness, the Gerechtigkeit, which we took as characterizing the disclosedness of the there. Seeing does not mean just perceiving with the bodily eyes, but neither does it mean pure non-sensory awareness of something present at hand in its presence at hand. In giving an existential signification to sight, we have merely drawn upon the peculiar feature of seeing, that it lets entities which are accessible to it be encountered concealedly in themselves. Of course, every sense does this within that domain of discovery which is genuinely its own. But from the beginning onward, the tradition of philosophy has been oriented primarily towards seeing as a way of access to entities and to being. To keep the connection with this tradition, we may formalize sight and seeing, enough to obtain therewith a universal term for characterizing any access of entities or to being as access in general. By showing how all sight is grounded primarily in understanding, the circumspection of concern is understanding as common sense, Verständigkeit. We have deprived pure intuition, Answehen, of its priority, which corresponds noetically to the priority of the present at hand in traditional ontology. By the way, intuition here is Answehen, Anschauungen. That I love how that's A-N-S-C, like it reminds me of the name of the rune for the letter A, Ansuj, which is an intuitive rune. It's a rune about that little intuitive voice. It's that Odin message. It's that little inspired thought. So that's something in the German, like that word probably goes back to Ansuj if you get deep about it. Like I'd like to know like what that word was in Old German. Which corresponds poetically. Intuition and thinking are both derivatives of understanding, and already rather remote ones. Even the phenomenological intuition of essences, the Wessenschau, is grounded in existential understanding. We can decide about this kind of seeing only if we have obtained explicit conceptions of being and of the structure of being, such as only phenomena in the phenomenological sense can become. This disclosedness of the there in understanding is itself a way of Dasein's potentiality for being, in the way in which its being is projected both upon the for the sake of which and upon significance, the world. There lies the disclosedness of being in general. Understanding of being has already been taken for granted in projecting upon possibilities. In projection, being is understood, though not ontologically conceived. An entity whose kind of being is the essential projection of being in the world has understanding of being and has this as constitutive for its being. What was positive dogmatically as an earlier stage now gets exhibited in terms of the constitution of the being in which design as understanding is its there. The existential meaning of this understanding of being cannot be satisfactorily clarified within the limits of this investigation, except on the basis of the temporal interpretation of being. Except on the basis of temporal interpretation. So what does that mean? As in with time, right? Because it has to now remind you that all these concepts being discussed are things that change. And only by change do you get a chance to experience for yourself all the facets, right? Which is why I have to switch between this is a good example of that and this is a good example of this, right? Because states of change have to happen, right? You're sitting there, you're worried about the serial killer who's about to lunge a knife into your heart, but you know, who cares about that? Because both you and the serial killer have to worry about the asteroid that's about to strike you. Right? You know, there's something else in the greater world happening while you're having a fight right here and now, right? It's you know, it makes me think of in the movie They Live. You know, Roddy Piper and Keith David are having that back alley wrestlers brawl, slamming each other because one of them thinks that the best thing to do for his friend is to beat him into just taking a look at what he sees because he really likes him. He needs him to be on board with his world in order for them to go forward. There's something that happens. It's a very honest moment in social dynamics expressed in that scene. That's what makes that scene so fucking amazing. All of our hearts have been there of that. This fight is about me trying to tell you something that'll save your fucking life. That you just want to live in the practical world, and you know that I'm trying to fucking throw this rabbit hole colored goggles over your eyes. Right? And so there becomes a fight about it. Right? Was it right to force him to see that world? Granted, the way that movie operated, yeah, maybe. Because them, because there's a evil agenda on the underbelly and you're working a little bit too close to it. Anyway. But that's in the movie. For most people, it's just like 99% of the time, nothing bad's going to happen to them. They're going to just continue to live in their service of a system that is better designed for them than it is for you, who is, considering yourself a part of regular, ordinary, innocent humanity. Anyway. Okay, let's see, where was I? Being there, so on and so forth, being in the world. Talked about solutions. Did I talk about solutions? All right, I'm going to go from halfway down this chapter. I feel like that's a little bit more appropriate. Has not Dasein's being become more enigmatical now that we have explicated the existential constitution of the being of the there in the sense of throne projection? It has indeed. We must first let the full enigmatical character of this being emerge, even if all we can do is to come to a genuine breakdown over its solution and to formulate anew the question about the being of throne projection, being in the world. But in the first instance, even if we are just to bring into view the everyday kind of being in which there is understanding with a state of mind, and if we are to do so in a way which is phenomenally adequate to the full discloseness of the there, we must work out these existentialia concretely. Hold on a second. Konkreten, or konkreteren, which means more concretely. Okay. Where are we at here? So it's 10:30. We started at what? 8:45? So 9:45 to 10, almost 10:30. Hold on a second. How long is this particular? Give me a second. 195. We're at 188. Nah. I think we're good. I'm pretty happy with the results tonight. I didn't want to go ape shit. I didn't even do my radio show tonight. I've been in a funky state anyway, irregardless of what happened last night. So it's all well and good because I wasn't feeling very good about certain things, and it wasn't really an issue, but I was thinking about saying something about it because I wanted to fix some things, make some things a little bit better. But, at least as suggestions. But, it wasn't, it wasn't going to go down like that. I have to stand up for myself, you know. Anyway, so I think everybody who was listening in, looks like throughout the stream I had 6 views and 3 likes. Appreciated. You know, I only blasted this out on my personal social media. You know, you can see some of them right there, like mine's. Just because, like, I'm halfway introverted in my vibes right now. So anyway, but I am excited, like, because of how much of the book that we are getting through. Let me see here. Was this? There's 83 of these, and we're on 32. So, there will be plenty more content for me to come just on the principle of this one. All right, guys. I will catch you later.